Tango 1 at the top, we are at pop-up vehicle. 10-4, Tango 1, you have control. Tango 1 copy. Stand by. Stand by.
Integrity, passion, resilience. That's what this place was built on. That's what our community is founded on. Don't act like the example, just be the example. This is the home of the greatest fitness community in the world. We're trying to create strong, able bodies, resilient to injury with a gas tank to get shit done. If there's one thing from this podcast, it's about taking immediate action, find the problem, fix the problem. This is your opportunity. It's either a hell yes or a fuck no. It's that simple.
You're doing that with the Tango 1 podcast.
Now is the time to take action. Now's the time to do more and be more.
All right, welcome to the Tango 1 podcast, episode 0. I'm Tony Smith. I'm a retired cop, tactical team leader, currently the founder of the Garage Gym and the leader of Tango 1 Solutions. I'm going to be joined week in, week out with my good friend, fireman, and head trainer at the Garage Gym, also an amateur stuntman, Casey Wright. Our mission is to challenge you to never settle and to guide you to take immediate action when it comes to life's problems and weaknesses. We'll be talking about our own experience as well as calling on some pretty amazing guests, including pro athletes, fitness leaders, and ultra successful entrepreneurs. We want you to use our well-rounded team of experts to discuss communication, team building, and leadership skills, as well as to lend some amazing perspective. I want to share the habits and the tactics that I employ to mold my mindset and cause me to have a successful career in the stressful world of SWAT and now in the unpredictable world of business. These practices encompass training in the gym, nutrition, relationship development, stress, time, and money management. All together, I want you to conquer life. Fuck average, do more, and be more. This episode of the Tango 1 podcast is brought to you by our friends at Axle Films. Axle is a video production company providing creative strategies and powerful video marketing campaigns for brands. They provide creative video services for small and large companies alike, having worked with brands such as us, the Garage Gym, and the world champion Toronto Raptors. If you're a motivated business owner looking to launch a new product or service, Axle has the experience and the know-how to bring attention to your brand through creative video marketing. With Axle Films, they'll focus on your goals and use their creative storytelling to introduce your brand to the world. Axle has been with the Garage Gym since day one, and they have helped us to attract many new members and increase our overall business. Axle is an all-in-one video production service offering everything in-house from strategy concepts, writing, to producing, capturing, and editing your final branded video. Visit axlefilms.com to learn more and tell them Tony sent you.
Let's go. So that was probably the most difficult part for you today, trying to memorize any of that. So kind of first one, day one, I think the big thing today, I think we should focus just on where this all began. You know, the background of your life, where it started from the day you were, not the day you were born, but as a young age, kind of where this all began and how we've ended up into this well-designed podcast room that we did.
Yeah, man, this whole thing, everything, right, comes from the heart. And I'm so geeked to be doing this with you and to getting our message out there to more people and hopefully helping more people. So for me, it started when I was young. I was like obsessed with sports and fitness. I was always into doing push-ups, swinging off the monkey bars, all those things. My dad was a cop. He eventually became the chief of police. He had no education at all, but he was a super avid reader. And he really pushed me to learn on my own because I was never really into school. And, he was kind of ahead of his time in that, nurturing what he saw as my passion, which a lot of it was to do with leadership. So he just fed me book after book. And much like him, I started really digging the self-education as much as, probably more so than I did just going to school other than the sports part. I was into fitness really early. My mom was always into exercise. She was always doing little Jane Fonda workouts, the step-up workouts, going to the gym. And at a young age, my dad actually built me a garage gym. So before anybody had rigs, my dad welded me up this sick rig, hung it in my garage, and I started doing pull-ups, push-ups, and bench pressing all the time. My mom started making healthy food, and that really generated all kinds of muscle through my teens. My dad had a real scare with cancer, with heart disease. And we switched how we ate, my family. We started eating whole foods before this was a thing, before you were probably born, right? We started eating all those great foods that we now preach to all of our members back in those days when we were all eating Kraft Dinner and processed cheese, etc. And then my mom got cancer. So it wasn't my dad that had the cancer. It was my mom that she actually had cancer. And that really bonded us together. And I know, like, from your family and from the people that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, obstacles can really break you or can build you. And I feel like my mom having cancer, going through that for such a long haul, it really just bonded our family together and gave me a love for food because I started doing all the cooking at home.
It's crazy. It's crazy how things like that can kind of make or break a family too. Like, we had a scare. My father had a little scare one summer, and it was just like, you kind of see how people react to it, and you kind of see who somebody is. My dad's talks to every single person he walks by in the grocery store, which obviously isn't a good thing now, but he's just like such a positive person. So when he had his thing, going up into the cancer ward and just seeing him, he was so positive the whole time. He just had such a good attitude, and it just gave you that peace of mind, like, it's going to be fine. He's going to crush this thing. And also seeing how that works with the people around him in that room was pretty amazing. And, luckily, to this day, he's been cleared and everything's great. But it is pretty crazy how little things like that, or not little things, scares like that, though, can really change and alter the way a family kind of perceives what they're doing. And especially in a positive, healthy way like that is a good thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. Like, my mother, it just like lent me so much perspective. She attacked that thing with like a smile. She was so, maybe behind closed doors there was different things, but that the influence she put out, whatever she put out to us, was just positive, and there was never a doubt, like, we will beat this. I am going to beat this. And she never stopped saying that, and that's stuck with me through every obstacle. And that's what everything that we're going to talk about, and everything, all these great things we're going to do on this podcast, it's always going to be about starting within, finding that problem and fixing it. So shortly after high school, I started playing football, the AKO Fratman, a Canadian junior football team. Arguably the best team Windsor's ever seen, we like to say, as I talked to a University of Windsor quarterback. But no, so we won the national championship 1999. One of the best days of my life. That Saturday, I walked off the field, a national champ. I had 1 year eligibility left. And that very 2 days later, Monday morning, I put on my police uniform for the first time as 21-year-old cop. And it was pretty incredible to work there. With my dad being a cop, it had always been what I wanted to do. But I'm telling you, man, shit got real quick. Real quick. Within the first few months of being on the job, my good friend and a linebacker, an all-Canadian linebacker and kicker from my team, Al Stajic, drowned. And my dad was actually tasked with leading the operation to search for his body. I went out there. As part of that, I begged him to let me go. And I went out and, seeing his loved ones and just being around that kind of, it just hit me so much that my life at that point was never going to be the same. There's a shield that kind of has to get built around you to endure that job. So I loved right away. If you don't know, you start in patrol as a cop, which is like the cops you see driving around every day, handling all the calls, going to the chaos, and, also doing the normal things like dog complaints and shoplifters. But I loved it. I loved being part of the thin blue line, the camaraderie that it represented back in those days in the early 2000s, before a lot of these crazy rules came into place and the over, cover your ass type things that people are doing and the liability worries that we have these days. It was amazing. And I remember I was in the lineup room, which is where they come and tell you your assignments for the day. And that day, the TAC team, ESU, we call them Emergency Services Unit, the SWAT team, they came in and they asked me to take part in a little project they were running. And the team leader at that time, we call him Heat. He's still one of my best buddies, a mentor to me, Kyle Hartley. He came up and he did a briefing. And I left that room that day and I set my goal that I wanted to be the team leader of that team. I loved it. I was just so impressed by them and by his presence and how, without any rank, he controlled that room. Over the next few years, man, I was like a shit magnet. So we call that shit magnet in the cop world, is like a good cop. Sometimes it's not a good cop because you just run into things, but I feel like a good cop puts him in a good position to be in, to have some good luck. and I ran into things all the time, murders, bank robberies, all these things. And I just, I started to get so much more experience and confidence. And I trained my ass off so I could get on that team. I tried out, and at the age of 25, I got a call, and it was like, you're on the TAC team. And I couldn't believe it. I was like the youngest guy, I think, ever to get on there. I might still be, or if not close. And I had only been a cop for 4 years, and now I'm 25 years old. And I'm getting taught all these crazy skills, like all these weapon platforms, hostage rescue, negotiations, stealth tactics, camouflage and concealment. And I became, my first job there was a less lethal specialist, which I loved. Less lethal specialist meant that I got to go on all these like hand-to-hand fighting courses. So I got to learn some jiu-jitsu and some wrestling and all these different varieties of MMA. And I also got to go and deal with like the taser and basically everything that we can use to control a situation that won't kill you. And I loved the taser. I was one of the highest rated ranked taser operators around. I trained people from all around the world on how to use the taser, which also meant that I got tasered like hundreds of times, but also got lucky enough to taser all kinds of people. One of my favorite things to do is to taser your friends, and because their reaction is so much better than bad guys.
Definitely. Actually, the first time we found this out later on, the first time we met was you tasering me.
Right.
and not in a negative way. We were there for a leadership camp with our football team at the University of Windsor, and we went for a day with the ESU team here in Windsor, which was awesome being a player and getting to see this. We got to come out, they were shooting snipers, we were running obstacle courses, we had to do team drills with masks on and crawling through mud, and obviously at the end they asked for volunteers to get shot in the back with a taser, and I gleefully put my hand up and quickly regretted that decision. And
oh, it's so funny. So funny. This guy presents this video to me like, I don't know, like 10 years later. Pretty amazing that how the world comes around and we our paths crossed again. I'm glad you put that into concept though for everybody so they realize it wasn't like out on Olette Avenue when you're in a drunken rage. No. Yeah, so man, things got hot though quick on that team. I was on that team when the Atkinson murder happened. And when John Atkinson was murdered, he was a police officer, also a former AKO fratman, and a friend and mentor to mine, somebody who helped me to get on the police service and looked over me while I was there. He was murdered. And when that happened, the chief at the time, this is a couple chiefs ago, decided it was time to bulk up in terms of our drug and guns. And so they like tripled the drug and gun unit, but the TAC team stayed the same size. So we had triple the TAC team basically worked for the drug and gun unit to help secure evidence and secure scenes and help them for their investigations, take down bad guys so that they can interview them, all these things. So all the people that were feeding us the work, it grew, but the TAC teams didn't stay size. So we worked around the clock, and we started doing drug raid after drug raid. At one point, we did as many drug raids as the Toronto team. Right? Not crazy. As many. I think we were like 40 short, but they have 80 guys and we had 16. So the amount of overtime we were putting in was wild. Part of the cool thing on that team is, like I told you, I love fitness. Obviously, we're owning a couple of gyms now, but we got to work out every day. I ate well all the time, but working around the clock and dealing with monsters, I was like becoming one inside. And there's a great picture, maybe we'll throw it up there, of me basically living the same life as far as working out and eating. But one, I'm fat, I'm chubby. I mean, it's still muscular, but I'm chubby. And then one, I'm ripped. Difference was the stress. Alcohol consumption was definitely up, but the stress was huge, and how you sleep and how you handle stress and what you're dealing with can really weigh on you. And we had multiple complaints, lawsuits, court cases. I mean, we were the tip of the spear going against the worst of the worst. And there was an expectation of some of the things that we were doing. I mean, we were heavy-handed and not wrongfully so, but rightfully so, in my opinion, doing what we needed to do to safely get the job done. But that led to a lot of complaints, which is stress, getting your name in the newspaper, being charged under the Police Act. That's stressful stuff. So some of those things were weighing on me. And when I wasn't working, I was drinking, man. I was drinking way too much.
So obviously at this point in your ESU career, like you're probably run down, right? You guys are the front line of everything. You're kicking down doors. You're doing what you can, and in that position, compared to all first responders, from the stories, you're overworked and and exhausted. How did that affect kind of the way you looked at the job, and did that kind of inspire you into getting higher up in the ranks? Like, how did you end up Tango One? How did you become the leader of this team?
Yeah, so yes, the rundown thing, and I think the biggest problem for us was we were so close. These guys were like, became and still are some of my best friends. But when you're working, 12, 16, sometimes 18-hour days, and when you're not working those long days, you're going out together, you're hanging out together, you're spending every minute together. You're never out. We talk about rest and digest all the time in fitness. There was no rest and digest. So you weren't allowing yourself to process a lot of the shit that you saw and a lot of the shit that you did, because you're just staying in that moment with these guys, right? Which was our strength, what was our weakness, which is a pretty weird thing to say.
Right.
So the Tango One thing, first of all, Tango One is the team leader. So that's the position we talked about right at the start of this podcast. That spot that I wanted, that I was like so respectful of, and I just wanted to stand in those shoes one day. It has no rank. It's the leader, and it's voted on by the guys. So I don't know what exactly happened, but there was like a surprise movement of one of the team leaders. He got another spot, moved to some other position, and decided to leave. And one of the guys nudged me and said, you should put your name in the hat. And it was weird because that was always like a senior position. And, the guys who usually would get it would have 7-8 years on and be a senior guy. And the middle of the pack guys would go for it, knowing that they weren't going to get it. And the low end guys like me at that point didn't put their name up. So when I say put your name up, we put on the same whiteboard that we have downstairs in the gym that I write every workout on still to this day. The guys gave it to me when they went to the high-tech smart boards. So anyways, I write my name up on the board, Tony Smith, under the team leader nominations. And not nominations, but you had to self-nominate. You had to tell the guys yourself you wanted it. And man, the voting happened, and it's just amongst the guys. There's no interview. There's no anything. It's the guys on that team deciding who they want to represent them as leader. Talk about the ultimate compliment. So I get the call from my sergeant after the vote, and he said, "You're the new team leader." And at this point, I think I was 28 years old, and I couldn't believe it because I wanted the position, but I really didn't expect to get it at that point in my career. And all of a sudden, the next day, my very first day as team leader was taking down a murder, like a murder that had been unsolved for quite some months. So I was a team leader for about 10 minutes, and I had to go surround a house on Jeanette and lead this big operation to get out 2 murder suspects who had, tortured and killed somebody out in the Richmond and Walker area. So talk about, learning from a fire hose or drinking from a fire hose. And that position was just incredible. Being a young guy in that position, I think, is part of what's made me successful throughout the rest of my life. Because when you're the real senior guy, you could just say like, "Hey, Casey, you go do that. Go do this." In the old school days, especially back then. But I couldn't do that because everybody on that team was senior to me pretty much. So I had to be really political and learn my way and manage up, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Right. Had to really earn the respect of your peers, right? But it definitely shows a lot because you could almost take that into like sports and teams. Like been a part of a lot of teams in my life, and seeing that kind of on the inside is you see a lot of people who kind of they earn their spot because they were there for so many years and they have that rank when the team's not always on board with that. So if you take that, which I think is a great way to do it, how you guys picked your leader through the SU, you had the peers themselves, they're picking who they're going into battle for. They're picking who, is running their team and leading them into that battle, I think is such a more positive way to kind of run a team and to really pick a captain, right? So I think that's pretty incredible, and definitely getting that honor from your peers, especially it's got to feel good from guys older than you teaching how to do that. Being in that leadership role now, so now you're a young guy, you might have a little bit different perspective on the job and that new era kind of way to how you would run the job or what you might think might change things. Like being in that leader position after a year or so, you start to catch a rhythm with it. What did you change, do you think? Or what did you start to implement that you didn't notice before? Or how did you look at the job differently than the guy in front of you did?
Yeah, so the first thing I learned was like the whole idea of saying, I don't know, and I still to this day, you hear me say it in here all the time. I don't know. Let me find the answer. Let's find somebody who knows the answer, somebody with some experience. So all the time I was doing that as a young team leader, asking the senior guys like, hey, what would you do here? What do you think here? And weighing all the options and making a decision. And then, yeah, we were kind of stuck in the archaic. We were one of the last teams around that was doing I'm not going to bore you guys with these tactics, and there might be some cops listening, but doing some tactics that were like archaic. And just like when you came on our team, and I think that's helped me to accept this, is that there's some things here at the garage gym, even though we've only been 5 years, that you're coming to me, Nikki's coming to me, Riley, super young Riley's coming to me and saying like, why don't we try this? And it's like, yeah, because like a lot of our ideas back then, and I think that's how I became the team leader, was because I had a lot of ideas that guys liked, but was getting shut down by some of the senior guys. So that's really helped me. And we started to move along with bringing in some new tactics. One of the things that really sucked about what we did was, back in the day it was smaller and you knew everybody. So like when guys would try out, like me, people knew me. But like as it was getting bigger, the police service, and busier, we didn't know everybody who was trying out for the team. So we would just do a physical and an interview and then decide. That's it. So one of the things I implemented, and with everybody on the team, I was just tasked as my project, was the new selection course, which was a 5-day long hell week where we really got to know the insides and outs of these candidates. And that was like, it was awesome. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done. It's something they're still doing, and they have tweaked it a million times. They've improved it. If they didn't, I'd be disappointed in them, but they've improved it. So that's where all that came from. And, that's where the name Tango 1 came from as well. Like Tango 1 is the senior team leader on the TAC team. And that's where this whole Tango 1 is just kind of became part of me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so moving forward, that, like, I know some of your tactics that you brought into it, or it always was a tactic of the team, was working out together. But I know you went and trained with some psychos at Jim Jones. How did that fall into the mix here? How did that start to change the camaraderie of your team, and basically how you start your day and how you bring all those guys together?
So it's really hard to describe the whole transition in my life, and but it was, I feel like I started as this bright young kid, like just like really happy-go-lucky. And then I my life, although my career didn't dip, my career continued to step up. My personal and what was going on inside of me dipped. My health, I was becoming really disconnected with my friends, my family, the people that were really, really important to me, that I was shutting out. And as I moved along and up to this point in my life, I've continued to try to improve what's inside. And that was the first thing I felt that I needed to do as the team leader, was to improve myself, because I wasn't happy. I looked in the mirror, I looked at a picture. I remember getting a picture back. I just got with Danny, we went away, and a picture came back of myself on the beach, and I was like, oh my God, I've had abs every minute of my life. And all of a sudden I had this like beer belly. I was drinking all the time. I was wearing a lot of stress. And I was disappointed. I'm looking around my team and I'm like, these guys, we're out of shape, man. We're supposed to be the cream of the crop. We get paid to fucking work out. How do we, we're going through the motions. And so I started to get into this Jim Jones. And Jim Jones was my buddy, is a company like out of Salt Lake City, famous for running the 300, the Gladiator movie with all those jack dudes. And my buddy, Rob McDonald, but he goes by Bobby Maximus, was a UFC fighter and a Toronto cop that actually was roommates with me on a fighting course when I was doing that less lethal stuff. And he quit Toronto police to run his UFC career and manage Jim Jones. And him and I had reconnected, and we were following his workouts. I was following his workouts with a couple of guys. And Danny sent me up there as a surprise birthday party to go take a seminar from him, which was really cool, but I didn't care to be a trainer. I just learned it. I brought it back and we started working out together. And the other team leader at the time, there's two team leaders, Mark Murphy, he decided that we're going to work out on Fridays together. And I was like, you know what? This is a great thing because like at Jim Jones, we did Fuck You Friday. So that's how Fuck You Friday that we just did here today together.
So it was born.
Yeah, and it was born, man. And it became a thing of the TAC team. Fuck You Friday was a day that we got down, we threw down. And it made us better. Like you can see the passion. It makes me excited talking about it. How we acted together, how we handled situations, how we started to bond was just in a different way. And it wasn't over beers. And it wasn't over whiskey anymore. It was over fitness and health, which was awesome.
Which is such a positive thing, right? And you fall into those habits. Like when I was working up north doing forest fire, it was the same kind of thing, right? You were with your team and you're out sleeping in the woods for 19 days and you come back and all you want to do is hang out and you drink and the same habits just continue and continue. And even though you're being active on the side, the amount of partying or bad habits and eating and drinking you're doing just kind of shuts that whole thing down. You lose that maintenance.
Yeah.
So it's tough to it is tough to kind of redesign that and get back into, those positive things which make you better in the job. But it's funny how it plays kind of back and forth.
Right.
Just like that.
With me getting the team leader, they kind of like basically the way I took that was this team needed a change. If they were willing to give me a guy of 2 years, 28 years old, the opportunity to stand in front of them and represent them, we needed a change. And like I tell so now doing this Tango One Solutions and consulting with other businesses and other coaches and, just businessmen in general, the first thing I tell them, like when they tell me their complaints about the team, I'm like, well, what are you going to fix in you?
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I started to fix me before I could fix the culture there. Not fix it, improve it. Because there was a great culture there, don't get me wrong. But we needed to improve it because times were changing and we weren't. And that's a scary thing when it comes to policing and the liability and the consequences that come with that.
Policing's got to change. From what I watch on TV, criminals get smarter.
Yes, they do.
so
yes,
do the cops, so do the habit. So kind of moving forward now, you've got these Jim Jones certificates and you're doing that. You're starting to train the guys in ESU. How do you start training people outside of the police force, right? Now you found this little bit of a spark and a passion in training people. And how does that go from you just keeping the guys, from eating that extra burger and working out in the morning to, now starting to train what we are today, 100 people, a couple hundred people.
Yeah, well, you got to see. So I was team leader for, I don't know, it was 6 to 8 years. It's all blur now, some of it. But 6 to 8 years passed between those points, right? I was probably Jim Jones, started with a couple years into being team leader. And now things have progressed. We had, as a unit, really become very professional. In some ways, to a flaw. Because I missed the old schoolness, the really living together, like the old police movies, like the police TV shows or whatever. But we started teaching our tactics, became the way to do things. We were so busy that we were making tactics. We had to, because we were like a lot of these teams that were teaching at the time just only did a tenth of the calls that we were doing. So we were developing our tactics on the fly, and now we were going around and we were teaching them to everybody. And I was teaching leadership and all these cool things, man. And we were still taking care of business out on the road. We were running leadership camps like what we talked about with you guys and all those things. And then one day, the new chief decided that I was going to be tenured out. And I got my 6 months notice, basically. In that 6 months, I kind of decided that, they took away my passion and took away what I really, really cared about at the police department, my only goal. And I met with the deputy chief at the time, and, he basically said, hey, don't be sad about this. You're going to be promoted. I said, well, I'm not going to work here anymore. Why would I? There's nothing left for me to do here that I want to do. I've done everything I wanted to do as a police officer. And I think he was taken back by that, and I didn't really know where I was going to go. I thought private security, back then, there's a lot of private security jobs that are paying a ton of money. And, but the Jim Jones thing just kept coming around. And a bartender, of course, this always comes back to a bar when I was on that team. A bartender told me what he was paying a personal trainer. And I said, you know what? I got my training. I'm good at this stuff. I can teach you. Come by my house. And I had equipped my house, my garage, with a pretty good setup. And he started coming by and started training him. And then he brought his girlfriend, Jess, who was basically became our first paying customer, and then a couple more people. And then it just grew and grew right here in the Monopoly subdivision. The garage gym was born.
It's crazy.
It is pretty crazy.
And then now it is what it is today.
Yeah, they started knocking on my door like it was Fight Club.
So with that, you're training a couple people in the gym. Like at this point now, you're kind of juggling both jobs though, right? So you're working, you're still in the force, you're working people in the garage. Danny's also on the force, your wife, she's working as well. And now you're starting to grow a family from all this, however that happens. And like that's a lot. It's a lot to go on. So at what point do you kind of start to make decisions and see where you go?
Yeah, I mean, all that we just talked about happened in this like big span, but then really short span. Like I went from being this wild man to married with, a kid on the way and having this gym operating out of my garage. I had gone back into patrol, and so had Danny, and she was in the drug squad previously. And you know what? We just started to look at our schedule and didn't like how it looked. We were going to be working like all the time and having 2 days off in common. And our kids were going to have to sleep out all the time. So we made a kind of a plan in our head. Like, hey, what if we can start training people a little bit at a time? We can give up one police salary, continue to fund the gym and grow. And that's what we did. Colton was born. Danny started getting her Jim Jones certifications. So just after leaving the TAC team, I finished my Jim Jones certification, level 3, which is the hardest thing, harder than any selection course, any Hell Week I had ever been through. I got that certification, became the only one in Canada. Danny then became one of the first females in the world and the only one in Canada. And she started, even with a big pregnant belly, training people. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And all the while, I was back in patrol and we had switched to 12-hour shifts. And man, I am telling you, a lot of these business coaches want to say, don't grind, man, don't grind. Fuck that. At the start of every business, I cannot imagine how you could succeed without grinding. And I was grinding to the point where like I fell on the floor one morning after cooking. Not one morning, one after. It was a morning for me because I stayed up all night on midnights. Had my family over for Thanksgiving, cooked them dinner, went upstairs to change out of my smoky smelling clothes from the barbecue, and fell over. And that was the wake up call to like, we need to fast forward this thing or hire somebody to run the gym.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot. Like, and that's a big thing, like managing all of that. So one thing I think kind of to bring up, but we'll definitely talk more about it later. So working with the mental side of things, and right now you've got a lot going on. You got 2 jobs, a business on its way, wife with kids coming, and there is so much mentally on the table there, right? And stuff like that. And I could bring this up because you have been very open with it, and at times you struggled with PTSD. And I think that's a topic on its own that we'll get to a whole nother day, right? But what were a few things, like at this point now, you're coming near the end of your policing career, you're starting this gym thing. What were some things that maybe looking back at you were doing wrong that you've learned coping methods now, and some things that you can start to wish you did that people could do in that situation now?
Right. So the whole time through this, I worked on fixing myself. And one of the first things that I did to fix myself, which I've learned was a mistake, and I hope that some cop, or it doesn't have to be cops, it doesn't have to be PTSD, but somebody here listens to this. And I started avoiding the triggers. I stopped watching TV. Not that stopping watching TV is bad by any means, but I actually stopped driving into the city. I didn't go to Windsor. It would stress me out. It would build anxiety in my chest that I can't even describe. I stopped doing all kinds of things. I really cut down on my alcohol, and I stopped reading the newspaper. I don't read the newspaper. I didn't read the news, all to avoid. I found movies was one of the worst things to trigger off a real bad night for me. And those things just kept building and building and building, but I never went to get help. I never went to get help until recently, like you've said. We can talk about that a whole other time. But when I went back to patrol, and people think SWAT is crazy, and I hope the patrol guys are listening to me. When I went back to patrol, it was nothing like what I had left. There were so many more rules. The camaraderie was down because of the shifts, and it was insane. When you go to calls as SWAT and ESU, as we call it, you're prepared. You know what you're going to. You've planned for it. But when you go in patrol, you're going in with you and the guy next to you. Very little plan because you don't really know what you're walking into, and shit got crazy. My shit magnet, the term that they had used for me was back. When I went back to patrol, I walked in on a murder. Not many people have done that. I had a guy slash his throat in front of me. I worked 13 shifts in a row where I saw a dead body, and I know for sure there are sergeants listening to this that have done way more shifts in a row like that. I had to ram cars off the road. I pulled a jumper off a balcony after a 14-hour negotiation. It was insane. All the while working the gym and not sleeping definitely plagued into my mental problems and the things that plagued me right up to 6 months ago, and that I am nervous to this day that will come back.
Right.
My anxiety was at the all-time levels, and I just had to make some changes again. And that's when I decided it was time to walk away from that job. I had to take that uniform off.
Which is awesome. And yeah, I think that might come up later, is like there's definitely so much involved with that, and I think a great topic maybe in the future. But for people listening now, like what could be, like we always talk about immediate action plans, right? Say someone is listening right now and having those stresses and anxieties, like what would be your go-to one paragraph, like immediate action plan? Like what is something for people to do? Something people, if they need that immediate help, like what would you recommend like right away? What are some strategies they can do?
Well, I don't want this to sound like it's the bad way, but if you think something is wrong with you, something is wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with something being wrong with you. Does that make sense to you? And that was like my biggest hiccup in my head. It honestly I wasn't really worried what fucking people would think about me. I'm a pretty confident guy. I was more worried that there was nothing wrong with me and I was going to go and they're going to tell me that. I don't know that even makes any sense. So if you're really thinking that there's something wrong with you, there probably is, and it's okay. Go talk to somebody. Everything I've ever done in life, I've had to get a coach for. Why on earth I thought that seeing dead bodies and slit throats and dead children wouldn't fuck me up and that I didn't need help to get through that is beyond me. It seems cavemanish to me, but that's the way it was. And I know that there's going to be people listening to this podcast, and I know I have friends that are in the same boat.
And that's good. And that's amazing to like admit things like that, and people going through that. Like it's good to know, and good to know it's normal to, not normal, but people in that situation, like sometimes they think that they're such a rare individual, right? Going with these stressors or thinking one aspect of it's weird. It's definitely not. And that's great to know. I think great advice for people to just, reach out right away. So moving on through that all, like now you're finishing off here. You've talked about the near end of your policing career. You've started training people in the gym, right? So now you've got 2 people, 5 people, 10 people showing up at your door. At what point is it starting to click? What kind of light bulbs are going off in your head that maybe I can turn this into a business and start to, train more people than my garage can handle? Hey, this might actually become a business. Like you obviously have a passion for it, the passion for training people and helping people in that way. When do you kind of make the decision, like it's time to open a gym?
Yeah, so in my head, I knew I was coming towards the end of the policing career, but we were still, I don't know, a year and a half out when we were still at my house. But we talked about that with Danny and the schedule. She was on maternity leave, right? Which is the great thing about this country. I know we'll have some American listeners that won't get this, but a year's grace after to have a baby. she got another 90 days extension onto her maternity, and then put in for another one. You know, we knew it was a shot in the dark, but she put in for that one and got denied. And at that point, you know, we had 30 people come into our backyard. And if you rewind 1 year, this building that we're sitting in here right now doing the podcast, Danny and I had walked through. We walked through it with my good friend Dave Haas. You know him. He's been, even though he's like been one of my best buddies forever, he's also been a mentor in business for me. So him and my realtor Ty, we came in here and we walked through, and I was like, what the fuck? But I really believe in like going and having that vision. So like I talked to you guys about, like, you know, like go and eat at a nice restaurant or get the nicest hotel and just feel what that's like. And like, then you're going to get yourself back there. And that's what we did. We came in here a year before and we're like, this place is too big. How could we ever do this? And then all of a sudden we got 30 customers. And we're like, man, we can do this. And we signed this place. We signed it and signed the lease for whatever years it was. And Danny sent back that message when she got denied from maternity. She's basically like, you know, I quit in a really respectful way. And she started working this business. And the second Danny started working this business, and we haven't spoke much about her in this podcast, but she has so much to do with everything. My success, my ability to like recover from some of the things that I've gone through, and just like the support all in all. But when she's the one who took this business and grew it, because she walked away, and within, you know, 30 to 60 days, I think our business went up like 30%. Which just goes crazy for all you entrepreneurs listening to think that laser focus on one thing, you know, the kids, obviously she was focusing there, but like from professionally, it was just the gym, and it grew. And then a year and a half later, I broke my ankle, which is a weird thing. I broke my ankle, and I went through there was a shooting in the police department, and then I broke my ankle, and it was a couple of events in a row. And when I was off with my broken ankle, I kind of thought I'd miss being a police officer. I didn't miss it one bit. In fact, I dreaded going back. So when I went back, all I could think about was quitting. And one thing led to another. I again applied for a leave. I won't even get into what happened with that, because it's the one thing, the only bitterness I have towards the police station was that I got denied my leave and I quit. And the same thing happened again. Within 90 days, this business grew 30%. So having that focus and having that passion and living it just grows, man. Fire catches, right? Fire spreads, like, you know.
Yeah, definitely. But that's amazing. And so now it has grown to what, over 350 members now, and in 2 locations. A second location opened in Kingsville. You know, things are moving. The last while, we've got a whole online presence, which is amazing. And then it's from there was, now you've got more and more clients coming in, and the next step here is basically, you know, building your team. And I think one thing from personal experience, being a part of all this, is seeing how you've built a team. And I can see some of the tactics you have from your past, and through policing and ESU, how we bring it into the business, right? Like I see we're sitting in our war room right now, right? We've got the whiteboard on the wall. We've got the big dark table, you know, dark lighting. It looks like someone's attic, which is great. But, you know, just the way you approach the business, in the way of like, we have 1 hour to get this meeting down, right? Yes, we're not planning on breaking a door down and running upstairs to catch somebody, but we are planning to, you know, be successful, to launch the next program, to implement these new ideas within the company. What lessons really stuck with you, and what lessons have you been like trying to build on from being a team leader and a SWAT guy into now being a business owner and creating a team? And how do they kind of intertwine as one big full circle?
Now, this is the best part. This is the part that I'm so passionate about. This is why I wanted to do this podcast and do it with you, honestly, was that the perspective. I gained so much perspective. You know what? At the end of the day, the decisions we make, nobody will live or die right from them immediately. right? I mean, if you let yourself go over life, yes. But like the point is that I think a lot of people don't have perspective on their problems. And I think policing lent me that. And not to say that my problems were higher than yours, but a lot of people's houses that I was going to, they were. They were life and death, and they were dire, positions. There was poverty. There was all these terrible things. And the most customers that come in here, they don't experience that kind of stress, but they feel like they do. And that's where we try to lend perspective to it, because stress is perceived. Me seeing a dead body can be the equivalent of somebody being late heading in their memo to their human resources, right? Like, because it's perceived. So we really try to lend perspective to people. And like from growing this culture in this gym, it's that team is everything. Your team is everything. And you need to be constantly trying to develop leadership. Because one of the things that happened when I was going, and one of the biggest mistakes I made on that TAC team, was I acted like I was going to be there forever. And I really, really regret that. If there's one thing I could go back and fix, it'd be that. It'd be that 6 months was the only time I really tried to like make somebody else into a team leader. I should have been trying that every single day. And I think from the moment you walked in here, the moment Nikki's walked in here, Steph, even my wife, Danny, I am trying to make it so you guys have every single quality that I think is necessary to lead this team. And when I say team, it's not just people who work here, it's the people that come here. Every single person is part of this team. The other thing I really learned is you can only control what you can. And we have avoided this COVID thing, you and I, speaking about it for a purpose, but it happens here. It's like control what you can. We could not control what happened there. We can only do what we can, how we react, and then we move forward. And that's all we've done here, and that's how we've treated everything. There will be fuck ups all the time in business. And we have had so many. I've had so many in everything I've done. But it's done. Deal with it, move forward, and focus on what you are going to do, not what's happened.
Yeah, definitely. That's amazing. And things like that I can definitely attest to is one thing you've built around here is that culture, right? One culture with our team, I think, is incredible. One thing that we have the opportunity to is, yes, you're the boss, you're the head honcho here, but you've given everyone their projects and you come to me for questions for certain aspects of the job, right? You go to Nikki for certain questions for the aspect of the job. You give us that kind of leeway to be creative and work on our skills, right? Like I still teach you how to turn your computer on some days,
This
right?
morning, yes.
So you allow us to kind of run with what we know. And with that, everyone's got their own identity and the business just kind of thrives through that, I think, and giving, your employees that, confidence, but also giving us the tools and, support to do these things, I think is incredible and a great way to run this whole business. And I think we have been, knock on wood up to this point, quite successful doing it. And one thing too, like I definitely just admire about this entire thing is, and how you went from policing to being a business owner at the gym is I think they have a lot more connection than you think, in the way of when you were in policing, you went into it with the sole purpose basically to help people, right? You want to save lives. You want to run into that building. You want to, same thing with fire. You want to run in that building. You want to pull someone out, 10 years down the line, you want them to stop at your house and thank you and say how much you changed their lives and, just help people. And even though now you're not sitting there with a gun or you're not, running into a house during however many horrid situations, you're still changing a lot more lives than you think, right? And we thankfully get it all the day as people, sending in messages that, you never know, even though you're a whatever class individual, you can be struggling just as much as someone who is, lower in that. And so the purpose has never really changed kind of in your values. And you went from, saving lives on the police car to now, saving lives every day in this gym. So I think it's just incredible and it's exciting to be a part of all this stuff right now.
Yeah, the mission has always stayed the same. The platform's changed. That's all. And, you can really make a lot of assumptions by looking at somebody. It's not just the person that's lost 100 pounds. We have a few of them here. Quite a few of them here. It's also the people that, there's some people that if you look at them, you're like, man, that person is in great shape. But when we get messages about changing their mindset and how this gym helps them to deal with their day-to-day stresses in their lives, that's the biggest, that's like getting a trophy every single day. And I really firmly believe, like, you're a first responder, I was a first responder, that all of us get into this for that very reason. And equal reasons, I quit because of my, what was going on inside of me, but also because, like, the world of policing changed. It was very hard to feel that reward of helping somebody. And I'm telling you, this gym business, for all the trainers or, gym entrepreneurs that go here, or other entrepreneurs, you are affecting people's lives. And that is the greatest thing you could ever do, especially, well, obviously if it's in a positive manner.
Absolutely. And it's all about that positive kind of reaction you get. It's so amazing. Like, running through, I look back on, like, the games, and like when we run our garage gym games and things like that, when you see somebody like hit a personal barrier and run through it, it is the most joyful thing you can surround yourself in. And yeah, I completely agree, and it's great.
Yeah,
that's it.
Let's do this, man. That's the end of podcast number 0, episode 0. We dreaded this thing. We got it done, and I can't wait for every single one to come. So hope you guys are ready. Give us a follow. Give us a like. All those things they say on every other podcast. What are we supposed to say? You guys know it by now. Just
thank all our sponsors.
Do all those things. Thanks to all the sponsors.
That are coming soon.
Yeah, talk to you guys soon.
Good. That's a wrap.